March 6, 1995. A day like any other. But for us at the Jenny Jones Show, it was a day when emotions, secrets, and daring collided in the bright lights of the television stage. We were filming a brand new episode, a familiar but always captivating theme: secret admirers. The idea was simple: 6 people, each of whom had a secret, an unrevealed love. They would reveal that love on live television in front of their significant other and in front of millions of viewers. The story begins with Jonathan Schmitz, a 24-year-old, polite, kind, and completely unaware that he is about to be thrown into a life-changing situation. Jonathan believes that he will be reunited with his ex-girlfriend, someone he was once very serious about. He even thought about marrying her. That is the hope he carried with him as he walked onto the set. I remember the look in his eyes, a little confused, but still hopeful. He had no idea that we were about to pull back the curtain on another person's heart. And then, the secret admirer stepped onto the stage, Scott Amador, a close friend of Jonathan's. They used to laugh, hang out, share stories every day. But never, not once, did Scott confess his feelings. Why? Because he knew Jonathan was straight. Because he was afraid. Because, maybe, he just wanted to keep those feelings in a small corner of his heart. But today, he chose option C. He stood up in front of America and said, "I'm gay, and I have feelings for you." I still remember the crowd, bursting into cheers, shock, laughter, even stares of disbelief. No one expected a man to stand on national television and confess his feelings to his straight boyfriend. Jonathan smiled wryly. He wasn't angry. He wasn't insulted. There was just a deep sense of confusion, as if the world had turned around and he didn't know what was coming next. I, Jenny Jones, have hosted many episodes, witnessed countless emotional moments. But that day, the day Scott chose national television to reveal his deepest secret, got me thinking. I asked myself, what would you do? Would you write a heartfelt handwritten letter, hoping that one day he would read it? Or would you confide privately, gently, and safely in case you were rejected? Or would you choose to appear on television with your heart bare and all the words of love that have never been said? It was more than an episode. It was a cultural moment, a test of the limits of truth and emotion. And sometimes when the heart speaks its truth, the consequences can be unpredictable. But it is a story you must hear to the end. I remember that day very clearly. It was a day like any other filming day. A packed studio, bright lights, and an interesting story waiting to be revealed. The theme that day was, a best friend secretly has a crush on you. A familiar, somewhat light-hearted, even funny topic. We had filmed similar situations before, with laughter, surprises, sometimes a little awkwardness. But nothing had ever gotten out of hand, at least until then. When Jonathan Schmitz stepped onto the stage, I could see that he seemed quite confident, even relaxed. He had no idea what was waiting for him. We made light conversation, asking a few questions before getting to the special reveal, who his secret crush was. He chuckled, joked, and was a little shy. But that was normal. All the guests had the same reaction when they didn't know who the other person was. And then, his friend Scott Amador, who had told the producers that he had a real crush on Jonathan. Not just a crush, Scott talked about his fantasies very honestly. In a video interview earlier, Scott had talked about whipped cream, champagne, and his fantasy of love. We projected the clip onto the stage screen. The audience laughed. Jonathan, at that moment, looked shocked but still laughing. He didn't scream. He wasn't angry. He was just confused. I asked Jonathan, "Do you think Scott likes you that much?" He said, "No, I don't know, but I'm straight." That was the end of it. There was no harsh rejection, no insult. Jonathan even said he felt flattered. And after the show ended, I heard that he had agreed to have dinner with Scott that night as a polite gesture, or just to keep the peace. But a few days later, the real nightmare began. Scott, hoping to get close to Jonathan again, left a note on Jonathan's door. Something only the two of them knew. We, the show's crew, didn't know. But with Jonathan, that note was the last straw. The moment he decided to go buy a handgun. I can't tell you how horrifying it was to hear the news. Jonathan had shot Scott. Twice at close range. No mercy. It happened so fast. Jonathan called the police and confessed everything. He said the reason he killed Scott was because he felt humiliated because of what had been revealed on our show. I was numb. The show hadn't aired yet, but it was enough to shock the nation. A TV show, my show, had become the starting point for a real murder. Although the episode never aired, the clip was leaked, and it became one of the darkest moments in American television history. I was criticized, questioned, and exposed to the public. Had we gone too far? Had I, or the show's crew, unintentionally put someone in an unbearable situation? I have no answer. All I know is that, from that day on, I never looked at television shows the same way again. I, Jenny Jones, learned a bitter lesson that behind every laugh, every dramatic moment on stage, are real people, real emotions, and sometimes the price to pay for entertainment is a human life. I've been on stage hundreds of times. There have been funny moments, touching reunions, tears of forgiveness, but nothing and nothing could have prepared me, the crew, America, for that fateful day. That day we thought we were preparing a fun, slightly daring, but not off-limits segment, a friendly reveal. Someone would reveal that they had a secret crush on their best friend. It was Scott, a likable, funny guy who said he had a crush, a genuine feeling for his same-sex friend, Jonathan. We even laughed at the scene where Scott talked about Jonathan. He's like whipped cream and champagne, the kind of colorful description that made me think, oh, this would be a lovely scene. When Jonathan came out and heard the news, he was shocked. It wasn't a funny kind of shock. There was no laughter, no applause, just an unsettling silence. I remember asking him if he was in a relationship, and he said, "No, but I'm definitely straight." I could feel the confusion that permeated the room like a fog. After that, I thought everything was fine. Jonathan even took Scott out to dinner that night, an unexpected act of civility that made me breathe a sigh of relief. But I was wrong. A mistake that the show and I could never undo. 3 days later, Scott was killed. Jonathan, whom I had met and looked into his eyes while talking, brought a gun, broke down Scott's door, and fired 2 shots at close range. Scott died on the spot. I was stunned, like everyone else. I asked myself, what did I do? Could I have stopped it? Should we have never aired it in the first place? But I didn't know then. I couldn't know. The episode never aired, and it never should have. But on the internet, nothing goes away. It's been archived, reposted, analyzed, dissected, called television's darkest moment. And I can't deny that. But the darkness doesn't stop on the television stage. Today, I see a different kind of abuse, not on camera, but on our data. Personal data is stolen, sold, leaked, like pieces of our lives laid out in public without anyone knowing. Remember the massive at breach? More than 70 million users, real people, with social security numbers, phone numbers, text messages, all stolen and posted on the dark web. You don't have to be an at customer to be affected. If someone who has texted you has an @T account, you're at risk. As someone who has seen how a small revelation on television can spark tragedy, I know the importance of privacy. And that's why I want to share this. Protect yourself online. One of the most trusted tools I've ever used is Aura, a comprehensive protection solution that detects data breaches, alerts when your personal information has been compromised, manages passwords, protects against viruses, and more, all in one app. From Kwok Lei, Shu Gully, a 55-year-old man living in a modern apartment complex, is known to many as a devoted husband and loving father. But since July 4, 2020, everything has changed forever. It was supposed to be a happy day. His little girl's 11th birthday. Shu had prepared dinner with his daughter's favorite meatballs. He even ground the beef himself because he wanted everything to be perfect. And to end the small party at home, the whole family enjoyed a tall glass of sweet, creamy milk. A night that seemed warm and sweet like any other family. But the next morning, Shu's wife, Lee, disappeared without a trace. A 48-year-old woman has disappeared from her apartment in Tokyo. Police are investigating the mysterious disappearance. Shu tried to keep his composure. He did what any desperate husband would do. He went to the news, begged for help, and offered a 100,000 yen reward for any information about his wife. His voice trembled during interviews. She would never leave her daughter behind, he said. Something must have happened. It sounded sincere, but then the truth began to crack. The police reviewed the security cameras throughout the apartment complex, more than 6 hours of footage. And then they realized something. Lai had never left the building. There was no camera recording her leaving. No one saw her leave. No trace. And if she hadn't left, where was she? The police searched everywhere, every apartment, every floor, every vent, every storage room, every cistern, but there was no trace. Until one investigator suggested, what about the community septic tank? A team of dozens began sifting through weeks of waste. 25 hours later, they found a viscous, unusual mass of liquid, unlike anything in the tank before. They sent samples for testing. Shu was arrested soon after, and the story he had told the media quickly fell apart. The truth was, that night, amidst the birthday cheers and the kitchen lights, Shu had argued with his wife. While making meatballs, he accidentally cut his hand and blamed her. Anger rose, harsh words, but this time was different. Shu had been prepared. He had bought a meat cleaver in advance, and that night he mixed sleeping pills into his wife and daughter's milk. As they fell asleep, Shu grabbed a pillow and squeezed it, ending the life of the woman he once loved. But the worst part was yet to come. Shu chopped his wife's body into pieces with a knife. Then he put each piece into the meat grinder, the same machine he had used just hours earlier to prepare his daughter's favorite meatballs. The mushy, unrecognizable meat was slowly flushed down the toilet for hours without anyone noticing. On TV, he cried. He said he didn't know where she was, but behind the door of that apartment was a horrifying truth. Finally, justice was served. Shu Gully, the beloved husband in the public eye, was sentenced to death for murder and gruesome disposal of the body. His actions permanently erased the image of a happy family and left a child without a mother and without a father. I'm Jenny Jones, and this is a heartbreaking reminder. Sometimes, the killer isn't the shadow in the dark alley. It's the person sitting next to you in the dining room, smiling. Evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers and cooks dinner. Kenji Nagai, September 27, 2007. A camera captured the chaos and pain in Yangon, Myanmar. Thousands of people poured into the streets, not to celebrate, not to be entertained, but to fight for their lives, for their voices, for a future they had never dared to dream of. They called it the Saffron Revolution, a wave of protests that swept across the country, sparked by the Myanmar government's abrupt decision to abolish fuel subsidies. The result? Gasoline prices rose by more than 60% overnight. The economy collapsed. People were in an uproar. But what made the world silent was who was leading the charge. Not the politicians, not the opposition groups. It was the monks, sacred symbols, the preachers of peace, wearing their robes and walking out into the streets alongside ordinary people. The government didn't listen. They didn't back down. They began to crack down. That day, September 27, police blocked the streets of Yangon. They announced, "You have 10 minutes to disperse. Otherwise, there will be consequences." 10 minutes passed. The crowd did not retreat. And then, gunshots rang out. Jenny paused for a moment, then slowly walked closer to the audience, as if pulling them into the eye of the storm. In that crowd, there was a man. No weapons, no slogans, just a camera, a pair of honest eyes to the world. His name is Kenji Nagai, a Japanese journalist with a career of documenting hotspots around the world. He has been to war zones, stood between the line of life and death, and this time he chose Myanmar. He believed in the truth. He believed that if he could capture those images, the world would have to see. But he could not return. The Myanmar government reported, a stray bullet killed Kenji. An accident. An unintentional mistake. That's all they said. Until you see Kenji fall, not from tripping, not from a stray bullet, but from a soldier pushing him down, then pointing a gun straight at his chest and shooting. It was an execution, in the middle of the street, in broad daylight, with hundreds of witnesses. Then you see him lying there, bleeding, but still clutching the camera, still not letting go, as if he were whispering, "Record it all." And then the camera disappeared. When Kenji's body was returned to Japan, the camera was gone. His family waited in agony. They petitioned. They hoped. But years passed. The camera never returned. The Myanmar government continued to deny it. They continued to insist his death was an accident. Until 15 years later, a small miracle. The camera returned. No one knows how. No one knows who risked his life to get it out of Myanmar. A group called Democratic Voice of Burma has pledged to help, but the identity of the person who actually brought it back remains a mystery. Kenji's family, after all these years of waiting, finally got it. And they did what Kenji would have agreed to do: share those final videos with the world. We don't just see Kenji's death. We see courage. We see a journalist in the face of death, holding a camera, as if to say to the world, "Watch!" Don't forget. The studio audience fell silent. Some shed tears. Some held hands tightly. Kenji Nagai died on September 27, 2007, but his camera his images, and the truth he brought will live on. And today, we tell this story, not just to remember a man, but to remind him that somewhere in the world, the truth is still hidden, and someone still needs to speak up. If I fall, pick up the camera and continue. Kenji Nagai, an icon of courage. The Wetten Das accident? I remember that night clearly, the fateful night of December 4, 2010, the night when everything changed forever. We were live in front of 20 million viewers, and tonight we started with an unbelievable performance from a special contestant, Samuel. Samuel, 23 years old, a young man full of passion for stunts. He is not a gambler. He is professionally trained, has done stunts, has fallen, has stood up, has pushed the limits. That is why the editorial team has decided to open tonight's show with a challenge: 5 jumps over 5 moving cars. To support, Samuel wears spring boots, also known as kangaroo shoes, which help him jump high like a professional athlete. The first scene begins. The audience screams. The stage lights shine down, making everything seem to catch fire under the lights. I stand on the sidelines, my heart pounding as I watch Samuel take his place. The first car, smoothly, easily, he passed it like he was jumping over a puddle. The second, he hesitated. His gait was a little off, but he made it. I saw the look in his eyes as soon as he landed, a slight shake of the head, a flicker of doubt. He sensed something was wrong. There was no turning back now. Samuel needed to complete the next 3 jumps perfectly. One mistake, just one, and he would lose. But on a show like this, the stakes were never just losing. The third one, a beautiful jump. The audience screamed. I breathed a sigh of relief. But then I saw it. The fourth. The car opened, and I froze. That's his father. Samuel and his father. He was behind the wheel, cold as stone. The two of them looked at each other from a distance. I will never forget that moment. Arms raised in greeting. A determined nod. A leap between generations. Samuel lunged forward, his legs taking long strides, his boots making a metallic clang. And something happened. He jumped, but not high enough. His head hit the windshield. The pop was so soft that it seemed like nothing. On screen, it was just a light tap. But I've been doing this long enough to know it wasn't a normal tap. He spun in midair, out of control, and then fell. Live. No pause. No commercial. No cover. The first sound was picked up by the microphone, not from Samuel, but from his mother. She was sitting in the audience, microphone to record her reaction. We expected tears of joy, a cry of pride. Instead, oh my gosh. The camera panned to me. I didn't know what to say. You don't train for moments like this. Everyone was stunned. The paramedics rushed in. But Samuel lay there, motionless, not making a sound. We had no commercials to cut. Nothing to hide. It was live television. The silence stretched on like a punishment. After nearly 10 minutes, Thomas Skoll, the main host, stepped onto the stage. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. Tonight's show ends here. For the first time in its history, Far and Away was stopped mid-air. Thomas resigned immediately. He couldn't bear it. I understand him. Samuel was alive, but 2 vertebrae in his neck were broken. His spinal cord was damaged. He was a quadriplegic. Permanently. And the most haunting thing of all, the driver who caused the crash, was his father. He was not at fault. We all knew that. But the pain, the torment, didn't leave him. Just like the millions of people who watched that night, no one forgot that moment. Far and Away never really recovered. After the accident, the show went downhill and was canceled just a few years later. No matter how hard they tried to revive it, the audience couldn't forget. They didn't want to forget. But Samuel, he was different. I saw him again many years later on a special night, the final show of Far and Away. Samuel sat on stage, his head raised, his eyes shining as brightly as the day he first stepped onto that stage. And he said, "What happened to me was not the fault of the show. It was not my father's fault. It was a risk I took for my passion, for my dream." That day, millions of people shed tears, including me. Samuel is now an actor, an assistant director, a man who continues to live his dream, even in a wheelchair. He lost his legs, but not the light in his heart. I will always remember him, the brave boy with the spring boots, and that fateful night, the night when European television stopped breathing. Ghost Watch. It was October 31, 1992. The country had just finished dinner, the kids were getting ready to trick or treat, and the adults, well, most of them were relaxing and turning on the television. None of us had any idea that what we were about to witness was going to be more than just a TV show. It was a shock, a cultural accident, an experiment gone wrong. On BBC One, a brand new show was introduced, Ghost Watch, a live-action TV special hosted by the venerable icon of British television himself, Michael Parkinson, and featuring familiar faces like Sarah Greene, Mike Smith, and Craig Charles. Their mission? To document a paranormal activity taking place in an ordinary suburban home. Not an old castle, not an old prison, just a simple family home in Northolt. I remember thinking, the BBC is doing a haunted house? And live? It sounded crazy, but that's why people were curious. And the show began. The Earlys and Mr. Pipes. The house was home to a mother named Pamela Early and her two daughters, Suzanne and Kim. They said there was a spirit living in the house, not just a haunting ghost, but a violent, dangerous entity. They called it Pipes. Mr. Pipes, because of the strange noises it made, which sounded like old pipes. For the first hour, the show was pretty quiet. Sarah Greene was live from the house. It all seemed suspiciously normal. A skeptic was brought in for an interview. He quickly dismissed everything, claiming the family was mentally ill, that it was all just a figment of their imagination. And then, the worst happened. From hoax to collective nightmare. Sarah suddenly finds her daughter Suzanne making noises, hitting the wall with a hammer. Everything seems to collapse. The whole show seems like it will end up as a bad joke, but it doesn't. That moment is just the dawn of a nightmare. A scream. A strange sound. The camera shakes. Suzanne is found lying unconscious, her body covered in scratches. She suddenly changes, speaking in a deep, unrecognizable voice. The scene sends chills down my spine, even though I'm just watching it on the screen. Viewers start to panic. The truth is twisted. And here's the important thing. Ghost Watch is not a live show. It's a pre-recorded, staged drama with actors. They're all acting, except for Michael Parkinson. But because it's presented like a reality show, the audience can't tell the difference between real and fake, despite the BBC's showy warning at the start of the program. Most viewers paid no attention. They really believed, that what was happening was real. Real-life panic. That night, the BBC received more than 30,000 emergency calls. Some called the station for help, others sobbed, fearing that Michael Parkinson had been possessed. His own mother called the switchboard, believing that her son was being controlled by a demonic force. A woman asked for compensation for new trousers because her husband had peed in them out of fear. Two boys had to see a doctor for symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And, most heartbreaking of all, Martin Denham. Martin, a real-life victim of a film. Martin was an 18-year-old boy living in Nottingham. That night, he and his family watched Ghostwatch. Martin had learning difficulties and had suffered from mental health issues, but never seriously. When Mr. Tube appeared and the noises echoed in the show, Martin began to hear the same thing in his real house. He panicked. He believed that ghosts had really returned, believed that Mr. Tube was hiding in the walls. Martin refused to turn off the lights, asked to change bedrooms, and had trouble sleeping. And just 5 days later, he ended his life. In his suicide note, Martin wrote, "Please don't worry. If there are ghosts, I am one now, and I will always be with you." Banned and a bloody legacy. The BBC immediately banned Ghostwatch. Since then, the show has never appeared on British television again. However, it still exists on DVD, online platforms, a dark legend of television. For me, Jenny Jones, this is more than just a lesson in the power of television. It's a warning that the line between fantasy and reality, when blurred, can have horrifying consequences. Sometimes, what is meant to be entertaining becomes a real nightmare.